Listen, this is not motivation. This is not inspiration. This is an awakening. Because something inside you already knows you cannot stay the same. Not after everything you've been through. Not after everything you've seen. Not after everything you've ignored. There comes a moment in life where comfort starts to feel like prison, where silence becomes pressure, where routine becomes weight, where your own thoughts start questioning you. And that moment is now. You are not weak. You are not weak. You are not lost. You are not broken. But you are stuck in an old version of yourself, a version that reacts instead of leads, a version that waits instead of acts, a version that thinks instead of builds. And deep down, you already feel it. This is not who you are meant to be. You were not built for hesitation. You were not built for delay. You were not built for excuses. You were built for execution. But execution requires something painful. It requires the death of the old you. Not physically, but mentally, emotionally, behaviorally. Yeah, because the old you loves comfort, loves shortcuts, loves tomorrow. But the new you does not live there. The new you lives in action, lives in discipline, lives in pressure. And right now, both versions are fighting inside you. One says, stay the same, it's easier. The other says, a change, or stay buried in potential forever. And every day you delay, you choose the same side again. But today is different, because today you are hearing this clearly. There is no more mystery, no more confusion, no more confusion, no more excuses hidden behind overthinking, only truth. And the truth is simple. If you don't change your behavior, your life will not change. Not your dreams, not your goals, not your vision. Behavior creates everything. So the question is no longer, what do I want? What do I want? The question is, what am I willing to become? Because becoming is painful. Becoming requires loss. Becoming requires sacrifice. Becoming requires discipline when nobody is watching. And that is where most people stop. They love the idea of success, but hate the process of becoming it. But you cannot skip becoming. You cannot bypass discipline. You cannot cheat consistency. There is no elevator in transformation, only stairs, and every step will test you, not to break you, but to build you. And now you are standing at the beginning of that staircase, not at the top, not in the middle, at the beginning. And the first step is always the hardest because it demands honesty. Honesty about who you are right now, not who you pretend to be, not who you plan to be, not who you plan to be, but who you are in action. And once you accept that, everything becomes clear. You are not behind. You are not late. You are simply early in your transformation, but only if you move. Because awareness without action is just pain. So today, we begin something different. Not a dream, not a wish, not a hope, a shift. From old identity to new identity. From hesitation to execution. From comfort to discipline. And it starts with one decision. I will no longer live as the old version of me. Not tomorrow, not later, now. Now listen carefully, because this is where it gets uncomfortable. Comfort is not your friend. Comfort is not safety. Comfort is not peace. Comfort is the slow destruction of your potential. It does not attack you suddenly. It does not destroy you overnight. It quietly keeps you the same, day after day, choice after choice, excuse after excuse. And before you realize it, years have passed, and you are still thinking about change instead of living it. That is how comfort wins. Not through violence, but through delay. So now you must understand something clearly. Every time you choose comfort, you are choosing the old version of yourself. The version that avoids pain, the version that avoids risk, the version that avoids effort. And that version cannot build anything meaningful, because everything meaningful lives on the other side of discomfort. So discomfort is not your enemy. It is your gateway. But most people run from it. They feel resistance, and they stop. They feel pressure, and they quit. They feel tired, and they delay. But you are learning something different now. You are learning to stay, to remain, to continue, even when it feels heavy. Even when it feels slow, even when it feels uncertain. Because growth does not feel good in the moment. It feels like resistance. It feels like friction. It feels like internal conflict. That is the sign you are changing. Not comfort, not ease, not relaxation. Change feels like struggle. So if your life feels too comfortable, you are not growing. You are repeating. And repetition without growth is decay. So now we introduce a new standard. You no longer ask, is this easy? You ask, does this build me? Because everything in your life is either building you or breaking you down slowly. There is no neutral ground. Even rest has purpose, or it becomes avoidance. Even thinking has purpose, or it becomes overthinking. Even planning has purpose, or it becomes procrastination. So now clarity becomes your weapon. You remove confusion. You remove emotional delay. You remove unnecessary thinking loops, and you replace them with action. Simple action, direct action, immediate action. Because action destroys comfort. Action breaks hesitation. Breaks hesitation. Action interrupts overthinking, and every time you act, you take power back from your old self. One action, one decision, one moment at a time. And slowly, you begin to feel something different. Not motivation, not excitement, but control. Control over your impulses. Control over your direction. Control over your day. And that control is what your life has been missing. Not more ideas, not more information. Control. So now you begin training yourself. When you feel like delaying, you act. You act. When you feel like stopping, you continue. When you feel resistance, you move forward anyway. Not because it feels good, but because it is necessary. And that is how the old you begins to break. Not all at once, but piece by piece. Every disciplined action is a crack in the old identity. And every repeated excuse is a reinforcement of it. So choose carefully, because what you repeat becomes who you are. And now, you are no longer repeating the old life. You are breaking it, day by day, action by action, moment by moment by moment, until comfort no longer controls you, and discipline does. Now, it gets real, because the biggest war you will ever fight is not outside you. It is inside you, inside your thoughts, inside your decisions, inside your reactions. Every single day, two versions of you wake up. One version wants comfort. One version wants growth. One version says, take it easy today. The other says, take control today. And the war begins the moment you open your eyes. Not later, not after problems appear. Right at the start. Because your mind is always negotiating with you. It tries to slow you down. It tries to convince you. It tries to protect your comfort. But protection is not always progress. Sometimes what feels safe is actually what is killing your potential. So you must learn to recognize the voice inside your head. Not every thought is truth. Not every feeling is guidance. Not every urge is correct. Some thoughts are just habits, old programming, old identity speaking. And if you listen to them, you repeat your past. So now you create distance. You are no longer your thoughts. You are the observer of your thoughts. You are the observer of your thoughts. You are the one who decides, not the one who reacts. And that shift changes everything. Because most people are controlled by impulse. They feel something, and they act immediately. No filter, no discipline, no resistance. But you are learning something different now. You are learning something different now. You are learning delay control. Thought control. Action control. Not suppression, but direction. You don't let your mind run you anymore. You guide it. You train it. You discipline it. Because your mind is like a machine. If you don't train it, it trains itself. And usually, it trains itself toward comfort. So now you interrupt that pattern. Every time your mind says, stop, you say, continue. Every time it says, later, you say, and now. Every time it says, you are tired, you say, move anyway. Not emotionally, not dramatically, calm, controlled, decisive. Because discipline is not loud. It is quiet power, and quiet power is unstoppable. Now understand something deeper. The mind fears repetition of discomfort. That is why it tries to stop you early. It wants you to avoid pain, avoid effort, avoid pressure. But growth is inside pressure. So you must outlast resistance. Not fight it emotionally, but outlast it through consistency. Because resistance always fades when you do not obey it. At first it is strong, then it weakens. Then it disappears. Then it disappears. And what remains is control. Now you are not reacting to life anymore. You are shaping it, one decision at a time, one disciplined action at a time. And slowly, the war inside your mind begins to shift. The old voice becomes quieter. The old voice becomes quieter. The disciplined voice becomes stronger. Until one day, there is no conflict anymore. Only direction, only action, only clarity. And that is when you realize something powerful. You were never weak. You were never lost. You were never broken. You were just undisciplined inattention. Inattention is everything. What you focus on becomes your life. So now you protect your focus. You stop feeding distractions. You stop feeding excuses. You stop feeding excuses. You stop feeding emotional thinking. And you start feeding action. Because action is what reshapes identity. Not thought, not desire. Action. And now every day becomes training. Not survival. Not waiting. Training. Training your discipline. Training your consistency. Training your focus. Until your mind no longer argues with you, but obeys you. And when that happens, you are no longer in conflict. You are in control. And control is the beginning of transformation. Now listen, because this is where everything changes permanently. Not temporarily. Not emotionally. Not emotionally. Permanently. Because discipline is not something you use. Discipline is something you become. Most people treat discipline like a tool, like something they turn on when they feel motivated. But that is not discipline. That is emotion with delay. And emotion cannot build a strong life. Only identity can. So now the shift happens. You stop saying, I need to be disciplined. And you start saying, I, disciplined. That sounds small, but it changes everything. Because when discipline becomes identity, you no longer negotiate with yourself. You no longer ask, should I do it? You automatically do it. Because that is who you are, not what you try to be. What you are, an identity is built through repetition. Not inspiration, not motivation, repetition. Every time you choose action over delay, you reinforce identity. Every time you choose focus over distraction, you reinforce identity. Every time you choose discipline over comfort, you reinforce identity. And slowly, the old identity starts to weaken. Not because you fought it, but because you stopped feeding it. Because identity survives on repetition. Whatever you repeat, you become. So if you repeat hesitation, you become hesitant. If you repeat delay, you become delayed. If you repeat excuses, you become excuses. You become excuses. But if you repeat discipline, you become discipline. And that is how transformation actually works. Not in one big moment, but in thousands of small decisions. Now understand this deeply. Your future is not controlled by your goals. It is controlled by your identity. Because goals can be ignored. But identity controls behavior automatically. So the real question is not, what do you want to achieve? The real question is, who are you becoming every day? Because who you become will always determine what you achieve. So now you build identity intentionally, not accidentally. You don't let habits shape you randomly anymore. You choose them. You design them. You repeat them until they become automatic. And once something becomes automatic, it no longer requires effort. It becomes natural. That becomes natural. That is the power of discipline. It removes internal conflict. You don't fight yourself anymore. You move as one system. Clear, focused, stable. And when that happens, life becomes simpler. Not easier, but simpler. Not easier, but simpler. Because confusion disappears. Now you know what to do. Now you know when to do it. Now you know why you are doing it. And clarity removes hesitation. Because hesitation only exists in confusion. So you eliminate confusion through repetition. And repetition creates certainty. And certainty creates identity. Uncertainty. Now you are no longer trying to become someone different. You are confirming who you already are. And that version of you does not wait, does not delay, does not quit. That version executes, even when no one is watching, even when nothing feels exciting, even when progress feels invisible. Because identity is not based on mood. It is based on standard. And your standard now is simple. I act. Not sometimes. Not when it's easy. Always. And this is where people change forever. Because once action becomes identity, there is no going back. You cannot unknow discipline. You cannot unsee consistency. You cannot unlearn focus. It becomes part of you. And now you are no longer building discipline. You are living it. Every hour, every decision, every moment. And slowly, your life begins to reflect that identity. Not because you forced results, but because you became the type of person results follow. And that is real power. Not motivation. Not motivation. Not hype. Identity. Now we go deeper, because at this level, there is no room left for excuses. Excuses are not harmless. They are not small. They are not small. They are not just thoughts. Excuses are decisions. Decisions to stay the same. Decisions to avoid responsibility. Decisions to delay your future. And every excuse you accept becomes a chain around your potential. Not visible, but powerful. So now you must understand something clearly. Your life is not controlled by circumstances. It is controlled by interpretation. Two people can face the same situation, and one builds a future, while the other builds excuses. Same situation, different mindset, different life. So the problem was never outside. It was always inside. And excuses are how the mind avoids truth. It protects ego, it protects comfort. It protects laziness disguised as reasoning. But truth does not care about protection. Truth only responds to action. So now you remove excuses completely, not partially. Not occasionally. That's occasionally. Completely. Because as long as one excuse exists, it will find a way to grow. I'm tired. I don't have time. I'll start tomorrow. I need motivation first. All of these are just masks. Masks covering one truth. I'm avoiding effort. And once you see that clearly, excuses lose power. because excuses only work in darkness, but awareness destroys them. So now you bring awareness to everything you do. You question your own behavior, not to judge yourself, but to correct yourself. Am I moving forward or avoiding? Am I acting or delaying? Are they building or escaping? And honesty becomes your new discipline, because without honesty, you cannot grow. I now understand something uncomfortable. No one is coming to rescue your discipline. No one is coming to force your change. No one is coming to fix your habits. That responsibility is yours, completely. And that is not pressure. That is freedom. Because once you accept full responsibility, you gain full control. No more blaming time. No more blaming time. No more blaming people. No more blaming luck. Only action. Only ownership. Only execution. And when ownership becomes complete, excuses disappear. Because you can no longer lie to yourself comfortably. You see clearly now. Every outcome in your life is connected to a decision you made or avoided. And that realization changes everything. Because now you stop escaping reality. And you start shaping it through consistent behavior, through disciplined effort, through uncomfortable action. And yes, it will feel heavy at first, because excuses are comfortable. They protect your ego. They reduce pressure. They delay responsibility, but they also delay your life. So you must choose comfort with stagnation or discomfort with growth. There is no third option. And now you begin removing excuses at the root, not arguing with them, not analyzing them, not negotiating with them. You replace them with action, immediate action, because action does not need explanation. It only needs execution. And the more you execute, the weaker excuses become, until one day, they no longer appear. Because your identity no longer supports them. And that is the death of excuses. Not forcefully destroyed, but naturally eliminated. Through discipline, through repetition, through identity change. And now something powerful happens. Your life becomes simpler. Not because challenges disappear, but because internal conflict disappears. You no longer debate yourself. You no longer hesitate. You no longer delay. You move. And that movement becomes your standard. And from that standard, everything begins to change. Quietly. Consistently. Unstoppably. Now we enter a different level. Because once excuses die, something powerful becomes available to you. Momentum. And momentum is what separates those who struggle from those who dominate. Most people never experience it. Not because they can't, but because they keep stopping. Not because they keep stopping. They start, then pause, they move, then hesitate. They try, then overthink. And every time they stop, momentum resets. And restarting always feels harder than continuing. That is why so many people feel stuck. Not because they lack ability, but because they lack continuity. So understand this deeply. Your life is not changed by intensity. It is changed by continuity. What you do continuously becomes your direction. And what you interrupt repeatedly becomes your frustration. So momentum is not about doing more. It is about not stopping. Even when progress feels small, even when energy feels low, even when results are not visible, you continue, because stopping breaks flow, and flow is everything. Think about fire. A small fire that keeps burning becomes stronger than a big fire that keeps going out. That is momentum, not size, consistency. So now your focus shifts again from a big effort to a continuous effort, because big effort without continuity is useless, and small effort with continuity becomes unstoppable. Now understand something important. So momentum is emotional at the start, but mechanical in the middle, and powerful at the end. At the start, you must push. At the middle, it becomes routine. At the end, it becomes identity. And once momentum becomes identity, you no longer feel resistance the same way. You simply move. Not because you are forced, but because stopping feels unnatural. That is real transformation. So now you build momentum intentionally, not randomly, not occasionally. Intentionally. You create systems of movement, small actions repeated daily, not perfect actions, not impressive actions, consistent actions. Because consistency is what builds speed over time, not urgency, not pressure, consistency. And once consistency builds, something changes inside your mind. You stop thinking so much, because thinking slows momentum, and action speeds it up. So you reduce thinking loops and increase execution cycles. Think less, do more, do more. And slowly, your identity begins to shift again. You become someone who does not break rhythm easily, someone who does not abandon effort after starting, someone who continues even when results are delayed. Because now you understand, results are not instant. Results are not instant. But momentum is immediate. You feel momentum the moment you act. not when results appear. So you stop chasing results emotionally and start chasing consistency practically. Because consistency guarantees results even if delay exists. Code you exists. Now something deeper happens. You begin to trust yourself. And self-trust is built only one way, through repeated follow-through. Every time you say, I will do it, and actually do it, self-trust increases. Every time you break a promise to yourself, self-trust decreases. Trust decreases. So your entire life becomes a collection of promises kept or broken. And now you choose carefully, because you are no longer just building habits. You are building trust with yourself. And that is the foundation of discipline. Not motivation, not inspiration. Trust. And once trust is strong, momentum becomes natural. You don't need reminders. You don't need pressure. You don't need motivation. You just move. You just move because your identity and your actions are aligned. And alignment creates flow, and flow creates speed, and speed creates results. Now you are no longer starting over every day. You are continuing something already in motion, and that changes everything. Yes, because starting is hard, but continuing is powerful. So now you protect momentum at all costs. You don't break it for comfort. You don't break it for distraction. You don't break it for emotion. You protect it because you understand momentum is your real advantage. Not talent, not luck, not timing, momentum. And once you master it, life stops feeling like resistance and starts feeling like progression. Step by step, day by day, action by action, until you are no longer trying to become unstoppable. You already are.